Okay. Module 7, Hunger and Sustainable Agriculture. I'm going to jump right in because this is a chunky PowerPoint. I didn't mean to make it super chunky, but just there's a lot of information, and technically this does cover two different chapters of your textbook. Um, but we're going to go off of sort of what we learned last week too, and sort of build into. Next week we're going to do water, which I'm really excited about. So we're sort of combining everything now, as you see, and how humans are affected and how we affect our local environment. And agriculture is a big part of that. So, first of all, we're going to talk about food and sort of the global access of food and who has access and who doesn't. We're going to talk about food security. So, 795 million people in the world, which is about 1 every 9 people, go to bed hungry every night. And poverty, not availability, is the major driver of food insecurity. The main problem is lack of economic access to food at national and household levels and inadequate nutrition. So, food security not only requires an adequate supply of food, but it also entails availability, access, and utilization by all. And we're going to break all of that down and talk about what all of this means. But essentially, what this comes down to is economics and poverty levels, being able to access food. Agriculture and food security. So agriculture is whether it's domestic or international is the only source of food for direct consumption and is raw material for refined foods. So like when you go to the grocery store, even if you're buying box foods or if you're buying canned foods or you're buying something fresh out of the produce section, all of that has to come from agriculture. Even if it's been heavily processed, it's going to start in agriculture in some capacity. Agricultural production determines food availability. And the stability to access to food through production or purchase is governed by domestic policies, including social protection policies and agricultural investment choices that reduce risks, such as droughts. So, where are we putting our agriculture and where are we putting our money in agriculture? Are we getting food from international sources? Are we doing it within our own nation? Are we producing our own food? That has to do with the stability of whether or not we have access to food as well. Staple grains are the main source of dietary energy in the human diet, and we're going to talk about that because I talked about it with my bio class too. And it's actually really interesting. We'll get there. So there are four components of food security, and we sort of talk about the four. We'll talk about the four coming up, but availability, access, utilization, and stability. I'm going to let you read the definitions on your own time because this PowerPoint is accessible from you, but we're going to go through what each of these means. So food availability, I found this really neat map online that was crop allocation. So pasture being animal farmland, and then cropland being agriculture and sorry, I guess animals fall under agriculture, but plant agriculture. So you can see, especially in the United States, we have a lot of agriculture going on, whether that is pasture, whether that is cropland. There's quite a bit. Does the global agriculture activity produce sufficient food to feed all the world's inhabitants? Today, yes. In this moment, yes. But remember when we talked about, sorry, this is on like a stand and it's very wobbly, so my face is very wobbly. I just didn't want to sit. I've been sitting for so long, so I'm standing. So in a couple weeks ago, we talked about population ecology and human carrying capacity. At what point do humans reach our carrying capacity to which we can no longer sustain ourselves and with the food that we have, and our population begins to decline? Remember, the populations of a lot of different species reached a level in which there was no food, there was no more food, so the mothers and the babies were starving, and so they would decline, and then when they declined, more food would appear, so it would go back up. So there's this carrying capacity. We haven't quite reached it yet that we know of, but we are also the dominant species on planet Earth, right? So we're waiting to reach that carrying capacity, and unfortunately, the carrying capacity is not equitable. Other cultures and other areas are going to reach that carrying capacity before some of the wealthier and some of the more developed countries will. So other factors may include emerging plant and animal pests and diseases, declining soil productivity, and environmental quality, which is going to increase use of land for fuel rather than food, and lack of attention to agricultural research and development. And in 2 weeks, yeah, because we only have 2 modules left after this, we're going to talk policy. And there was a major event that just occurred a couple days ago. I'm sure you all are very well aware of that. And it's going to change our political administration. And so I'm not going to dive into the policy necessarily in this particular slideshow, but note that is coming, and I have many an opinion about it. Okay, food access. So this is a view of Skagit, or at least of Mount Vernon. I think this is Burlington up here. This is Skagit River, and I went on to Google and I was like, grocery store. I just typed in grocery store. So I wanted to know the access that we had for food in the Skagit. That's what food access is do individuals have access to food? And that's going to depend on poverty, time availability, and access to stores. I know people that work 12-hour days. Hagen closes at like 11. Fred Meyer, I think, closes at 11 or 12 too. So some of them might be lucky enough to be able to access stores after their work hours, but they might only have a 30-minute window to go shopping. And they might not have that much money to spend. Hagen's stupid expensive. Freddy's is a little less expensive. You got your Wally World here. You got, your food cop's always expensive. Is there like what's the grocery outlet or something? But a lot of these are expensive, and food costs are increasing. So food deserts are areas that have limited access to food that is plentiful, affordable, or nutritious. And that means there's actually data and there's a lot of research that goes into where to build a grocery store, because they're trying to put, the government is trying to put grocery stores, hi Henry, at least within a mile of every house, which is a walkable distance. So that's the goal, is that people are able to walk to a grocery store, because again, not everybody has access to transportation and they have to be able to walk. Can you walk to a grocery store? So these deserts are more than 1 mile from a supermarket in urban or suburban areas, and more than 10 miles from a supermarket in rural areas. So if you're living on a farm, hopefully you're living within 10 miles of a grocery store. Otherwise, you're technically in a food desert. Food utilization. I was excited about this slide. This is my family. This is my baby brother. This is my sister and her husband and my little baby nephew. Look how cute he is. They went as the manana do 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 for Halloween. And there's a reason I put them up here. Let me get through this side. So the food availability to a household into nutritional security. Did I write that sentence? The food available to a household into nutritional security for its members. Still sounded weird. So the difference of food needs for teenage boys versus 80-year-old men, but also pregnant women. So this kid, my little brother, we're actually twins. And when we were in high school together, he did track and field and he did cross country. And I kid you not, he would wake up every morning and eat a giant Costco muffin and 2 bowls of cereal. And he was stick skinny. But he was running like 40 fucking miles a week. I don't know. And he was a growing kid. And high school is that time where they're really, you're really exploding just growth-wise. So your metabolism needs all those calories. So he could consume an exorbitant amount of calories. And he did. Versus my sister, who was pregnant, and she ate so much food when she was pregnant. And I could probably eat half of what my little brother ate in high school. And now, my parents eat like a tiny little meal a day. So there's a difference of food needs for different people, for different demographics. So not every person needs the exact same amount of food or the exact amount of calorie intake, right? And there's a lot of times that this is socially constructed based on culture. I actually didn't know this, but in South Asia, some women eat after everyone else has eaten a meal, and they're less likely than men in the same household to consume foods like meats and fish, which means they're not getting enough protein. And that's a cultural thing. So there's cultures that eat differently, and then just biologically, different types of humans will eat different types of food. Hidden hunger. Move my face. I guess it's not. fine. You see it now. Oopsie. Are commonly results from poor food utilization. So this means that a person's diet is going to lack the appropriate balance of macrocalories and micronutrients, which are vitamins and minerals, right? So when a plant is forming, yes, it needs photosynthesis, water, and sun to grow, but it also utilizes a lot of other elements within the soil. Nitrogen's a big one. Here's nitrogen. Phosphorus. Phosphorus. Phosphorus isn't up here, but phosphorus is important. But zinc, magnesium, manganese, sodium, copper, all of these are important vitamins that the plant intakes that then we consume, right? So that's my daughter. Oh no, that's my son. What are you doing? Stop. Stop it. He's scratching at my chair. Individuals may look well nourished and consume sufficient calories, but may be deficient in key micronutrients such as vitamin A, iron, and iodine. I watched this show. I don't even know if it was a show or if it was just like some YouTube thing where this girl only ate ramen noodles. That was it. That's all she could eat. Technically, she was consuming enough calories in the day, and calorie is just energy stored in food. So she was consuming enough calories. But ramen, fun fact, has very little nutritional value to it. It has a lot of sodium, and maybe a little bit of stuff here and there from like whatever powder she was using. But if that's all you're consuming, you're not getting the nutrients you need to survive, that your cells need to survive. Malnutrition occurs when a person's diet consists of too little or too much of certain nutrients. So even if you're consuming enough calories, like this ramen girl was, she was still in malnutrition. She does not treating her body the way that it needs with all these nutrients, right? South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa are the hardest hit by malnutrition. 149 million children under 5 were stunted in 2022, and 45 million were wasted. So stunting can cause irreversible damage to a cognitive development and can impact a child's future educational income and productivity opportunities. And in 2022, there were 390 million underweight people, 2.5 billion overweight people, and 890 million obese people. And all of that goes into malnutrition. It's all defined as malnutrition because you're not getting the correct nutrients that you need. So yes, underweight people are considered malnutritioned. I don't even know how to do that in the past tense. Doesn't matter. And this is sort of the depiction we think of when we think of malnutrition, right? So we see a child that has loss of muscle mass. You can see rib cages. He's got sunken cheekbones here. But I've also seen images of children that have this bulging abdomen, and that is because they have fluid buildup, because they don't have the appropriate nutrients. So they end up taking in nutrients from whatever protein cells they can find, which in a lot of cases is their internal organs, which is their skin, which is whatever. So you see these kids with these bulging abdomens, and that is technically an indication of malnutrition. But obesity is also considered malnutrition because it's indicative that yes, you're consuming enough calories, but you're not consuming the correct nutrients. So this is sort of obesity, but it's also malnutrition. So you can see Africa, the light pink are our undernourished populations, and then the red are our obese populations. So we see Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, East Asia are all relatively undernourished. And then our obese countries are Latin America, Europe, and Central Asia, and the Middle East and North Africa. I'm surprised the United States didn't make it on here. We would definitely fall into the redder category, maybe not as high as Middle East and North Africa. And thinking about, well, you're going to look at this in the lab, but what you should consider too is the Middle East, countries like Saudi Arabia are very wealthy. So they can consume more food and they can consume nicer food. But wealth and nutrition definitely correlate. And you're going to look into that, I think, in your lab this week. But all you need to thrive in the world are what we call macromolecules. And there's four. We're only going to talk about three. There's also nucleotides, and nucleotides are really important, but they're really important for DNA and cell biology, which we don't need to dive into. But we are going to talk about the other three, and the other three you've definitely heard of before. Okay. What are they? Macro just means large. So macromolecules are large molecules, and they're necessary for life, and they're built from smaller organic molecules. They're also called biomolecules. There's four major biomolecule classes. There's carbohydrates, lipids, which are fats, and proteins, and then nucleic acids, which I brought up here, but I'm not going to dive into. So a macromolecule can also be called a polymer, which means they're made up of many monomers. So a monomer here is just the large molecule, an individual large molecule. And if you have a strand of them, that's going to create a polymer. We're going to talk carbohydrates first. And carbs, I'm sure you've heard of many, many times in your life as you eat food. They're sugars. Essentially what they are is a sugar. And an individual monomer of a carbohydrate is called a monosaccharide. It's a simple sugar. It tastes sweet. You're going to see this with glucose. So a glucose, a galactose, or fructose molecule, these are all monosaccharides. They're individual carbohydrate molecules. And you're going to find these in candies, cakes, milk, and even fruit. So note that they're not necessarily bad for you. You don't, every time you see someone say, you don't want to eat candy because that's got too much sugar. Well, yeah, sugar is good for you though. I mean, to an extent. You don't want to be eating 5 cakes in one day. Don't recommend. Haven't tried it yet. Maybe after this last week I should. But they're not bad for you. They contain carbohydrates, and fruits and candy both contain simple sugars. A double monosaccharide, 2 monosaccharides together, is called a disaccharide. And these compose other molecules like sucrose, lactose, maltose. And these are still sugars. Oopsies. So sucrose you find in fruits, lactose you find in milk, and maltose you find in grains. Along monosaccharides, several monosaccharides are called polysaccharides. So 2 is disaccharide, but multiple is called a polysaccharide. And that is what forms a complex sugar. So these don't normally taste sweet like our monosaccharides do, even though they're made up of several simple sugars. You're going to see this with starch, which are found in breads, pastas, and potatoes. You're going to find this in glycogen, which is found in beef muscle. And you're going to find it in cellulose, which is found in plants like lettuce and corn. And the reason that carbohydrates are so important to your body is because it is our main source of energy. Think about like when your parents were like, don't give my child sugar because then they'll have a sugar high. There is a little bit of science behind that, but it's, I mean, the sense that it's a sugar high is sort of wrong. We're going to talk about that. So simple sugars found in candy provide you short bursts of energy. That's that sugar high that parents are like, don't give my child candy. There is a short burst of energy that you're going to receive with candy, with a simple sugar. But complex sugars like those found in pasta, they take longer to break down. So you hear of like marathon runners who the night before a marathon, they're going to eat a giant bowl of pasta. And that's because it's going to provide them with the energy they need to run, 32 fucking miles, which is like gross, but live your life, I guess. But that's why they consume so much pasta before a race, because it's going to provide them the energy they need. So those are carbs. Carbs are important because they provide energy. So continue to eat carbs. Carbs are good. I'm sick and tired of hearing this nonsense. Don't eat carbs. Listen, I'm not a nutritionist, but I do love me a good bowl of pasta. And I work out regularly. I just biked 10 miles. It was fine. But it just pisses me off when people are like, stop eating carbs. Take carbs out of your diet altogether. No, don't do that. Same with lipids. Lipids are fats. So these are biological molecules that are generally not soluble in water, and they kind of look like this. Some example of lipids are, sorry, I keep moving my face around. I don't know where I put everything on my screen. But other examples of lipids are oils, waxes, steroids, boop, and triglycerides. This is Probably well, it says it down here. This is the most common type of fat in your body. This is also the most common type that you will eat. So a triglyceride, this is your glycerol, this part up here. And then attached to your glycerol molecule, because it's technically a molecule, this is like a hexagonal molecule, are fatty acids. There are 3 fatty acids that are attached to this glycerol, and that's why it's called triglyceride. They come from butter, oils, and other fats. These are the calories that you eat, but your body doesn't need right away. So here's a fatty acid. And there are 3 types I'm going to talk about in regards to the triglyceride. The first one is a saturated fatty acid, stearic acid. These are important for energy in cell membranes. So these go into your cells. This is why your body needs lipids, because your cells are literally built out of lipids. But the human body can produce its own saturated fatty acids, so they are not considered essential to the diet, in the diet. So foods with saturated fatty acids are butter or red meat, cheese, coconut oil, palm oil. I want to make it known these are the healthy fatty acids. These are okay to eat. You want to eat these. Yes, in moderation. But when someone's like, don't eat butter, it's bad for you. No, it's a saturated fatty acid. That's fine. Eat it. Consume it. Put it on some bread. Unsaturated fatty acids, because of the double bond, this guy here, this is actually the double bond between the 2 carbons. In the center, these are liquid at room temp and are generally considered beneficial for health, commonly found in foods like nuts, seeds, and vegetable oils. So like, if you've ever gotten that peanut butter, hopefully you're not allergic to peanut butter, but if you've ever gotten peanut butter that has that solid butter part in the bottom and then it's oil at the top, right? And you have to mix it. That is unsaturated fatty acids. Also really good for you. Vegetable oil, olive oil is liquid at room temp. And you'll note everything on this page, these are all solid at room temp. Coconut oil, palm oil, butter, all solid at room temp. Kind of gooey. Butter's kind of gooey, but still solid, technically. But these are liquid. Oleic acid is in olive oil and corn oil. See? Oh, no. All right, this is where we start to get iffy. So this is trans oleic acid. This is our trans fat. And it's a type of unsaturated fatty acid that has been chemically altered through a process of hydrogenation. Partially hydrogenated, and that's where these hydrogens, that's why they're colored pink here. Partially hydrogenated vegetable oils makes them more stable and solid at room temperature. It can increase the shelf life of fats and oils. And this is stick margarine, fast foods, baked goods like cookies, donuts, crackers, fried foods. And there's more to it than just these bad things. It's processed foods, essentially, that help prolong shelf life. And they put some of this in bread. So like I have a chef friend who loves making bread from scratch, and it's delicious, but it goes bad in like a week. Like it starts growing mold, versus the bread that I buy at the store can last me 2 weeks, 3 weeks sometimes. And that's because it has trans fat in it. It helps provide a little bit longer lasting food for me. So it's sort of based on what your availability is. Are you going to be able to make it to the store every week and pay expensive money for fresh bread? Not everybody can. That's where we're getting with all this. And if you have too many triglycerides in fatty foods, they're going to build up in your blood vessels. So mild, this is probably most people. Moderate, maybe me after eating a giant bowl of pasta. And then severe, if you're eating a lot of fast food regularly, if you're eating a lot of red meat all the time, and cheese, which I do. I love cheese so much. It is going to clog your blood vessels. It's going to build up in your blood vessels. And that's what people say, don't consume too much of this because it will clog your blood vessels. They're not wrong. But moderation is totally fine. Lipids. Oh, we're still on lipids. So these are your long-term energy storage. Carbs are your fast energy storage. Carbs are like you want to eat those and then the next day run a marathon. And then you've used that energy stores, right? But lipids are long-term energy storage. And this is what bears do. So bears will consume so much food before they go and hibernate. So they build up a bunch of fat. to essentially survive in hibernation for an entire winter. One of my students in bio told me this really interesting anecdote that I didn't know, but apparently he watched a show that was like Naked and Afraid or whatever, where they go out into the middle of nowhere, um, into the wild, and these people have to survive in the wild for like 60 days or something. And this guy leading up to this event only consumed oil. That's it. That's all I think he ate some other nutritional things too, because if you're only consuming oil, you're going to die. But he was only drinking like vegetable oil and shit. And I guess he survived. And he would like he found a cave, he found shelter, and he sat there for the 60 days because his body would just use up the lipids that he had stored in his body, and he essentially hibernated. I don't know how true this is. To be fair, I didn't look it up, but my student told me this anecdote, and it made sense. I mean, that's what bears do. We definitely have a different biology than bears, but I was like, okay, I guess if you're going on Naked and Afraid, drink a bunch of oil before you go out there. And the guy won. So maybe I should Google that before I start spewing that story, but I thought that was interesting. It also works as insulation. If you have more fat on you, that helps you keep warm in colder months. Proteins. So the monomer of a protein is called an amino acid. Amino acid. So here are my monomers, here are my amino acids, and two amino acids are bonded together with what's called a peptide bond. So multiple of these are going to be called polypeptides. Polypeptides, there's. And proteins help with building tissue and muscle. So they're also really, really important to your body. A few other functions of proteins is they help, oh my God, I'm dying, is that they help control rates of chemical reactions and they help fight diseases. They're actually an integral part of your cell membrane. So like getting into your blood cells, getting into any, like through your skin cells, through your stomach cells, any of the cells in your body have what we call integral proteins. And an integral protein helps pass things through the cell membrane into other parts of the body. And this could be medication. This could be other medication. I don't know what other examples I can think of right now. It's late. But they're super important. So eating enough protein is important in building muscle, sure, but it's also important in being able to help fight diseases and help keep a body healthy. The cell membrane uses all of those components. And I kept this one up here. So nucleic acid is in the nucleus of the cell. And that helps with DNA synthesis. So it's super important. But in terms of eating, it's not that important for this talk. But all of these are called organelles within the cell. You don't have to know this. I just want to make it clear that almost every component in here uses one of those, at least one of those three macromolecules that I mentioned, either for function or for transport or for synthesis of some kind. So they're very, very important for consumption. And the whole point we talked about talking about this is because not all humans have access to all three of those nutrients, of those macromolecules. So you're going to look at food availability, and we're going to talk about conventional and sustainable agriculture. Oh, I guess maybe this is the second part of the talk. Sorry, my slides are also looking here. Got through all of them. It's looking good. That was basically food availability. And I'm not going to dive too hard, I guess, into food availability because you're going to look at food availability in your lab. But there is a lot of correlation between wealth and food availability. I'll go back to this one because it's weird to be on agriculture. Wealth and food availability, developing countries and food availability, as well as policy and food availability. So let's talk about how we get food in agriculture. Now we'll be here. So we're going to talk about conventional and sustainable agriculture. I'm not going to read all these out because we're going to talk through them, but I liked the picture. Because there's these two types of agriculture, and we use both of them, especially in the US. But before we can talk about agriculture, we have to talk about the soils and how soil is integral in agriculture. And as a geologist, I was very excited in this part of the chapter because I love talking about dirt. Brings me joy. What's happening? Stop with the, stop it. Harry, stop it. Thank you, sir. It's getting close to their dinner time, so they're just grumpy at me. So soil as defined by agriculture and horticulture, it generally refers to the medium for plant growth, typically material within the upper meter or two. In geology, it's very similar, but we sort of compose our definition of soil as being the organic material left behind from plant debris and rock degradation over time. So all of the constituents that are in soil are organic, nutritional, and this is sort of the place that there's a lot of porosity in soil. So there's a lot of water that can sit in the soil. And there's a lot of organisms that thrive in the soil. And geologically, it's also very important to us too, because we can make note of if human activity has taken place in an area because of soil. Importance of soil. So soil is important to our society as it provides the foundation for most of the critical aspects of civilization. It plays a role in nearly all natural cycles on Earth's surface. It is comprised of the cycling of key nutrients such as carbon, nitrogen, sulfur, and phosphorus, and they all pass through the soil. And it's also very important in the flow of precipitation, which is water, from the land surface into the groundwater, or it can control stormwater runoff into lakes, streams, bays, and oceans. And I am so stoked. You guys are going to hear about groundwater a bunch next week. There's a lot of geology that you're going to have to hear about next week, and I'm super stoked because it's really important. And water availability is such an important part of environmental science. And soil is a big part of that too. So I don't know if you've driven through some of these agricultural areas right after all this rain we've been getting, but it floods. And that's both helpful and hurtful in a lot of ways. And that's because the soil is oversaturated with enough water that the water can't seep into the ground. But it's also really beneficial if we have water flowing over the ground. It helps sort of cycle those nutrients, which is really good. It might kill some of the current plants living in agriculture, which is a problem, but there are pros and cons to all that water that we see on agricultural land. And the other important thing with that is, I know down in the Skagit particularly, right now we're getting a bunch of snow geese and we're getting a bunch of swans, and sometimes their poop is very helpful for fertilization. So if they're floating in the water and they're living their best little goosey lives, they're pooping, and that's also helping circulate a lot of the nutrients. That being said, we're finding that there is a lot of bird poop that's really acidic, and that can be good for a lot of plants, but if it's too acidic, that's really bad. There's a fine balance. But fun fact, bird poop, yay! Soil forming factors, the climate, big part. Organisms, we'll talk about that. Relief, which is like the slope, right? So the slope of the area. Do you have a farmland that's relatively flat, or is it on a hillside that has a lot of relief? Meaning, if you get a lot of precipitation, a lot of that soil is going to come pummeling down the side of the mountain. Parent material, where is all this soil coming from? And time. Soil takes a lot of time to form. It's not an immediate, oh, dead plant, soil. Well, in a sense, that's not true, I guess. The leaves right now, as fall is falling, the leaves are degrading and they're decomposing and they're essentially turning into soil. But that being said, it's not enough soil to build farmland. Like, you need a substantial amount of soil. I look like a Sith Lord with this, but I just got really cold, sorry. So it takes time for enough soil to build for you to grow crops. So climate-wise, this is such an important part. If you live in a northern part of the world, this is actually needle ice, which is kind of cool, that forms as permafrost under the ground. You're only going to have a small section of the soil that is actually thawed and available for agriculture. Here it says 15 centimeters, which means this might be 3 or 4 centimeters of thawed soil. So you can't have a whole lot of plants in here with deep roots, right? And that's why there's not a lot of agriculture in the northern part of the world, at least not plant agriculture. Pasture and animals, different story. The role of climate and soil development includes temperature and precipitation. Soils in cold area tend to be shallow and weakly developed. But here's our tropical area. Look at all this soil. I don't know that all of it is nutritional necessarily, but there's a lot of plant life that is constantly growing and constantly dying. So you have this buildup of soil accumulation over time that's also really good nutrient wise. So there's a lot of agriculture along the equatorial latitudes, right? Organisms, also super important. Wormies, little wormies here, they're so important for soil because they consume a lot of stuff and then they poop it back out with extra nutrients, which is great. Fungi, super important. A lot of the mushrooms that you see growing in the Pacific Northwest have a root system under the ground that you can't even really see. And they're really nutritious. They have a lot of nitrogen in them. Centipedes, which I think are super, super gross. Snails. I know these are like, I get like heartbroken about this because we have the cutest little snails that live in Bellingham. And every time I go for a walk, I just see them smashed on the sidewalk. Don't kill the snails. I know technically they're a pest, but they're really good for soils. Moles. I think they're cute, even though they don't have little eyeballs, which is weird. Ants, bugs, insects. I think this is bacteria. Oh yeah, bacteria. Super, super important for the degradation of soil. So a lot of these guys are eating decomposing plants and then pooping out the organic matter that other plants need to grow. There. I didn't realize there was a note. Conventional agriculture. Okay, so that was soils and why we need soil as part of agriculture. And that leads us into conventional agriculture. This is the agriculture that we're familiar with today. It is rapid technological innovation, which is awesome. But there are large capital investments in order to apply production and management technology. So these include large scale farms, single crops grown continuously over many seasons. Skagit sees a lot of this. We'll talk about that at the end. Up in Bellingham, my very, very first job ever in the world was up at Raider Farms in Linden, where I picked raspberries. We got on a big fat machine, and you could either walk next to the machine and gather the berries in like a crate, or you picked out the yucky berries on a little conveyor belt as it came out. It was a whole thing. I was 15, whatever. Actually, I think I was 14 when I started that job. Doesn't matter. That was my first job. It was in agriculture, and we had these huge machines, but that was conventional agriculture. Raider Farms is still growing raspberries every year. There's a uniform high yield hybrid crop, and they use a lot of pesticides, fertilizers, and external energy inputs. And this is to get a higher yield of product, so they get a higher profit margin. Oh, and high labor efficiency. Dependency on agribusiness. Sorry, I keep thinking I'm done. That's done, right? That's done. Okay. But there are ecological concerns attributed with conventional agriculture. I don't know why I'm so cold. It's like 55 degrees outside, but I'm freezing. A decline in soil productivity, wind and water erosion of exposed topsoil, soil compaction, and loss of soil organic matter. Hold on. I got a book here. Oh, I hope I have a book. I'm upstairs in my office. Here it is. Okay. There's this book called Out of the Dust. It's a Newbery Award-winning book. It's a children's book, but it's so good. You're welcome to read it if you want. It's sort of written like poetry, but it's about the Dust Bowl in the 1930s that happened in the Midwest when agricultural processes essentially upturned so much soil that they fucked up, and they turned up so much soil that the dirt would like it would just rise into the atmosphere. So they couldn't really grow any crops. And because it was sort of a dry season, this lasted several years, I should say, but it was a very dry period of time. There wasn't a lot of precipitation, so people weren't growing crops. because there was all of this erosion of exposed topsoil because people were trying to turn all of this land into agricultural land without really properly doing the research that it would take. They were just like, let's keep expanding. This is making us money. But they didn't have a good way of doing it. So the Dust Bowls, essentially how wind erosion exposed topsoil, and didn't allow plants to grow. And this is a really good book that pertains to the Dust Bowl. Highly recommend. Salinization of soils and irrigation water, desertification due to overgrazing, another issue with animals. If your cows are overgrazing in their pasture, it's, I guess, releasing the topsoil and not allowing for more grass to grow. Pesticides from every chemical class have been detected in groundwater and are commonly found in groundwater beneath agricultural areas. Eutrophication and dead zones due to nutrient runoff affect rivers, lakes, and oceans. I want to talk about this next week, I think. But dead zones are a real problem in the ocean right now. And this has to do with, we have a dead zone actually just west of us out of Washington State. And that's because Washington is such a high agricultural area. And this has to do with all the phosphorus and nitrogen runoff, which are two important nutrients for ocean organisms. But if there's too much, it can actually cause what we call a dead zone, where no activity can thrive. So no plankton can really live there, which means fish can't live there, which means larger organisms can't really live there either. And it's a real problem. Reduced water quality impacts agricultural production. And water scarcity. Again, we'll talk more about that next week. And then you guys saw this in the documentary, Leo's documentary about the destruction of tropical forests and native vegetation, but a lot of developing countries who are desperately trying to match economic and agricultural levels of developed countries are tearing down native vegetation to be able to plant crops. And it's really difficult because they're trying to find a balance of, well, we need the economic, like we need the money, but we're destroying these native forests in the meantime. And the orangutans were a victim of that. If you remember the orangutans, I don't remember which country. I'm terrible. I should remember, but I don't. But the orangutans were being displaced because that country was developing all of their ecosystem for crops and crop usage. And that's a big problem. Economic and social concerns. Economically, the U.S. agricultural sector includes a history of increasingly large federal expenditures and corresponding government involvement in planting and investment decisions. That's always going to be a problem, is governments poking their nose in places that they don't have a lot of knowledge about. We'll talk about that in 2 weeks. Widening disparity among farmer incomes. Farmers have little control over farm prices, and they continue to receive a smaller and smaller portion of consumer dollars spent on agricultural products. So if you think about, and many of you might be from agricultural families, but if you think about the agricultural part is the very first step to working its way up into the grocery stores, right? So you are farming a crop, and then you have to sell that crop to another industry, and maybe that industry is the industry that is going to refine it and process it, and then they sell it to another industry who's going to turn it into like macaroni and cheese or some kind of edible food, and then they have to sell it to the grocery store chain. So you have this like level of chain that this food has to go up in terms of power, and so each one of those industries has to make a profit. So that cost is going to continue to rise, which means that farmers are going to make less, because those other industries are going to want to buy for less. It's a messed up system, honestly, but it's all capitalism, honestly, is what it comes down to. Economic pressures have led to tremendous loss of farms, particularly small farms, because they're hard to maintain. More than 155,000 farms were lost from 1987 and 1997. So something I didn't know, but some of my best friends are agricultural people up in Linden. One of my best friends teaches the ag class at the high school, Linden High School, and she mentioned that Linden used to be a dairy town. It was huge with dairy. We still have Dairy Gold processing plant up there. And, you know, there's that, I don't know if you've heard, but I grew up in Linden, which is embarrassing. I don't like to talk about it. But if you've ever driven up into Linden, there's like this moment where all of a sudden you smell cow shit. It's just like permeable. It's in the air. It doesn't affect me anymore because I grew up with it, but like even crossing the border back into Canada, sometimes it'd be like just crossing the border and you smelled that and you're like, well, back in Linden. But apparently, the dairy farms have reduced, at least the massive production of dairy farms in Linden have reduced from like 30 or 40 down to like 2. I don't know if those numbers are accurate, but I know that just the drama of how much dairy has declined in Linden is very dramatic. It's very big. And now our focus is on berries. So we have, I think 75% of the world's exports in berries come from Whatcom County. Fun fact. And over 30 million acres has been lost to development. It's kind of sad. All right, your textbook had some strong opinions about organic farms. At least it's really seemed like it did. And I agreed with much of it for sure in terms of the problems that pesticides pose. But it was like strong. So if you read the chapter and you're like, oh my God, I have to go organic or I'm gonna die, please don't panic. That's sort of what I got when I was reading it. I was like, oh my God, if I don't start eating organic now, I'm gonna die. But it's not true. So there are potential health hazards that are tied to farming practices, including the antibiotics in animal production, and hormones. They put a lot of hormones in animal production as well. And this is the reason they do that is it helps fatten these animals so that when you go to the grocery store and you see a big fat juicy piece of chicken, you're like, wow, that looks so good and juicy and tasty, but 90% of it has been fattened by the use of antibiotics and hormones. And then pesticide and nitrate contamination of water and food. Farmer worker health is also a consideration in all farming practices. So in my book that I have shown you, Out of the Dust, one of the big problems with farming is just the inhalation of dust and particles constantly. And if you're working with big machinery that's sort of pushing that up into the atmosphere, you're breathing in a lot of that particle and a lot of that dirt, and your lungs don't like that. So there is going to be some health risks associated with farming, but associated with our eating of the farm food. And I found this picture. You can watch it if you want, or you can read it if you want. I'm not going to go through it though. So pests are living organisms that occur where they are not wanted or that cause damage to crops or humans or other animals. A pesticide is going to be a substance or mixture of substances intended for preventing, destroying, repelling, or mitigating any pest. And these pesticides can be effective. They can be fast-acting, and they're adaptable to all crops and situations. But prolonged exposure, remember when we talked about acute and the other type, chronic conditions, prolonged exposure to pesticides can be associated with several, it's right here, I don't know why, it's fine, can be associated with several chronic and acute health effects like non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, leukemia, as well as cardiopulmonary disorders, neurological, and hematological symptoms and skin diseases. Oopsie. The other thing with skin diseases too in farming is these farmers are out in the sun for a very long period of time, and skin cancer is going to be a rampant side effect of that as well. POPs are persistent organic pollutants, and they are a group of chemicals that include 12 organic compounds that I will not list here because they were big words that you don't need to know. But there are 12 organic compounds that make up these organic pollutants. And they have been widely used as pesticides or industrial chemicals, and they definitely pose risks to human health and ecosystems. They have been produced and released into the environment by humans, and they are persistent. So that means they last very long in the environment and they don't degrade very quickly. They're bioaccumulative, which was sort of a similar word to biomagnification. And toxic. That's it. That's what I'm saying. So they're a big problem in convention, that was all conventional farming, right? And that's a big problem. So this whole idea of sustainable agriculture, how do we find a way to grow crops, make it so every human on the planet still can eat and have food? Hi, do you want to come say hi? Oh, this is Harry. He says hi. He says hi, everybody. Put me down and feed me. Um, how do we allow everybody to eat, and how do we sustain the environment this way? So this was addressed by Congress in a 1990 Farm Bill, which I would love to discuss more in 2 weeks when we talk about policy. Ooh, that's a chunky section of words. So the term sustainable agriculture means an integrated system of plant and animal production practices that have a site-specific application that will, over the long term, satisfy human food and fiber needs. It's carbohydrates. Enhance environmental quality and the natural resource base upon which the agricultural economy depends, make the most efficient use of non-renewable resources, sustain the economic viability of farm operations, and enhance the quality of life for farmers and society as a whole. So this was all part of this 1990 Farm Bill. Thus, organic farming came to be. I mean, organic farming's been a thing for a long, long time, but it wasn't really part of the pop culture movement until probably the 80s or 90s. But organic farming is very useful because it promotes and enhances biodiversity, biological cycles, and soil biological activity. It's produced by farmers who emphasize the use of renewable resources and the conservation of soil and water to enhance environmental quality for future generations. What? My daughter's asleep on the chair. My son's being a pain in the tootie. Where are you? It's fine. It's probably destroying something, peeing on something. So organic meat, poultry, eggs, and dairy products come from animals that are not given antibiotics or growth hormones. And organic produce is produced without using most conventional pesticides. Fertilizers made with synthetic ingredients or sewage sludge. See, she put words like this into your textbook, sewage sludge. Nobody's making fertilizers out of sewage sludge, I promise. I think the craziest fertilizer that I have seen is they'll actually spread cow shit over fields, which is gross, but it does work as a fertilizer. But sewage sludge is not. We're not throwing human shit all over these fields. That's gross. Nobody's doing that. Bioengineering and ionizing radiation. Ooh. IPM, which stands for Integrated Pest Management, and refers to a mix of farmer-driven, ecologically based pest control practices that seek to reduce reliance on synthetic chemical pesticides. It involves managing pests, which is just keeping them below economically damaging levels, as opposed to just eradicating them entirely. And this is relying on non-chemical measures to keep pest populations low, if it's possible. Selecting and applying pesticides when they have to be used in a way that minimizes adverse effects on beneficial organisms, humans, and the environment. So one thing, can I help you? One thing I want to point out is this is a really great thought, and yes, it works, but it doesn't work at the scale in which all humans on the globe need to consume food, and that's the problem. That's why you're like, well, why haven't all of the farms in the world turned organic? It's not as easy as just saying, let's do it. There are problems associated with some of this management, as there is with any sort of integration with food. There's going to be pests everywhere, and they're going to be affecting plants everywhere. But we have seen these work, and they do, I will say, they work in smaller scales a lot better than in the large scales of a lot of these large industrial farms. So there are a few things that people are doing to help with sustainable agriculture. Biological control is the use of one biological species to reduce populations. So this isn't a ladybug, but I don't know if you guys have seen the bright green bugs. I don't know, they're tiny. They're like the size of a pea maybe. Those are called aphids. And they're really damaging to crops and plants. They nibble and then they lay their eggs and the eggs hatch and they nibble, nibble, nibble. So they're really problematic. But ladybugs eat aphids. So there have been farms that release ladybugs onto the property that help sort of keep those aphids at bay. Intercropping is growing two or more crops in close proximity to each other during part or all of their life cycles, like this guy. So they're growing two different types of plants because different plants need different concentrations of nutrients, right? So if you're putting a single crop on a giant piece of land, it's sucking up all the nutrients of that land. And the next year, it's going to be really hard to grow. Oh, my laundry's done. It's going to be really hard to grow the same crop because you've already sort of cycled through that nutrient. So maybe you've seen, 1 year they grow something different on that plot of land, and then the next year they'll bring back a crop. They do this in the tulip fields all the time. So tulip fields in April are sometimes different. They'll plant grass 1 year instead of planting tulip bulbs, and that helps sort of keep nutrients minimal, or I guess to help maximize the nutrients in the soil for tulips the next year, if that makes sense. And then finally, tillage, minimal tillage or no tillage. And what that means is when you till the land, you're breaking up the dirt. This is what happened in the 1930s with this awesome book, and the Dust Bowl. So they were tilling the land, which was digging up the dirt. It was loosening that topsoil, which when the wind hit, was bringing it all up into the atmosphere and causing this Dust Bowl. So if you minimize that tillage, so this person has put other plant components. I don't know if it's bamboo or I don't know what it is. But it helps keep that soil moisture in as opposed to tilling it, which will dry it out. It helps sort of cycle nutrients, sure, but this keeps the moisture in, so it keeps that dirt from flying up into the air. So there are some really great examples of sustainable and successful agriculture. Agroforestry in sub-Saharan Africa has been really, really successful. In sub-Saharan Africa, if you remember, have some of the lowest food availability. And a lot of these people are malnutrition. Still don't know how to do that in the past tense. Malnutritionified. A lot of these people have malnutrition. They're just not receiving all the nutrients they need. So they're building these farming practices that are actually very sustainable and very successful. In Kenya and Tanzania, the introduction of agroforestry practices have led to improved soil quality and crop yields. So they plant these trees next to these plants, and this helps prevent soil erosion. It helps enhance water retention, and it provides additional food. So if they're growing nut trees here next to whatever this is, like what does it matter? If they're growing trees that have another component to them, like nuts, like berries, like fruit, that gives them an extra source of income and extra food and extra nutrients. So they've found that this is actually really beneficial in a lot of their agricultural practices. Small-scale organic farming in Latin America. So again, organic farming is such a great idea, but it's really difficult to conceive in a large-scale agricultural industry. And there are multiple reasons for that. It's hard to sort of sustain those pests in such a broad space. And like release ladybugs, sure, but obviously there's not just one pest that's an issue. There's going to be multiple pests that are an issue. Water is going to be another issue. There's a whole barrage of problems with large-scale organic farming. And it's possible. I don't believe it's not possible. It will just be expensive, which is why a lot of these large farmers aren't doing that. Of course, least cost leads to higher profit. But in Ecuador, their program called Agroecology for Rural Development encourages small farmers to shift from conventional chemical-intensive farming to agroecological techniques, which includes rotating crops, like I mentioned the tulip fields do. So they rotate their crops every year. They use organic fertilizers, and they use integrated pest management at a small scale. And that has been very successful as well. Climate smart agriculture in East Africa. So in Ethiopia, the government and NGOs have implemented CSA, which is climate smart agriculture programs that teach farmers how to use water efficient irrigation methods like drip irrigation, and grow drought-resistant crop varieties such as drought-tolerant maize, which is corn, and use conservative or conservation tillage to preserve soil moisture. It's very dry in Ethiopia. You'll note that Ethiopia is sort of around that equatorial region, so it gets very dry and they don't have the precipitation necessary. So finding these ways to better retain water is really sustainable and really helpful. And growing crops that are drought resistant is going to be super important in the coming years. So this is actually science and research that will be very pertinent to a lot of places around the world. Okay, Skagit Valley. Wow, look at me go. I don't know how long I've been talking. There's a good chance it's been a minute. So your homework and your homework's going to pertain to Skagit. I thought this would be really fun and really cool because Skagit is a huge agricultural hub in the Pacific Northwest. We have a lot of farmland here. So you're going to be using some programs to look at the different agriculture. I'll talk about this in a second. But here in Skagit alone, we produce about $350 million worth of crops, livestock, and dairy products on approximately 90,000 acres of land. There are over 90 different crops grown in this county, including blueberries, raspberries, tulips, of course, daffodils, pickling cucumbers, specialty potatoes, Jonah Gold apples, I don't know if I said that right, and vegetable seeds. So, your homework this week, because I was really desperately trying to find something for you to do for your homework that wasn't super intensive and crazy. But what I do want you to do is you're going to be looking at 3 different components and articles sort of regarding Skagit County and our local agriculture. Some of you are doing your projects on agriculture, which I'm super stoked about. And I told a few of you to reach out to the Wazoo extension of agriculture. It's in Skagit. I've been there. And actually, here's my secret. I don't want it to get out too much because it's my super secret. But during the Tulip Festival, when you don't want to be driving down those back roads because people suck and they don't know how to drive, and the Tulip Festival just gets really backed up and you're stuck in traffic for like 40 years, instead of actually going to the tulip fields, which like, okay, you can get an Insta photo and then try to leave, I go to Wazoo's site, their extension site. You'll have to look it up. I don't remember exactly where it is, but it's on the border of the Tulip Festival, so it's very accessible during the tulip season. And they grow tulips too. They don't grow as many. There's not like fields and fields of them, but they grow tulips if you want a nice Instagram photo. And they have more than tulips there. It's a really stunning garden. But they do a lot of agricultural research. So I told a bunch of you to go there or to reach out to them because they'll have a lot of information on local agriculture and how it's affecting the area and how climate's affecting the agriculture here. But it's pretty cool. And one of the things you're going to look at, I don't think you have to click on this because I've already downloaded it. Yeah, this one I've already downloaded for you guys as a PDF. I'm just going to close out because it's going to pop up here. It's like a slideshow. They have a slideshow with a bunch of our local information, and they actually have it through, oopsies, like 2019 or something, or 2006. So it goes back to 2006, which is cool. But you're only going to look at 2023 because that's our most recent one. You're going to look at that. You're also going to look at the Skagit Valley Crop ID, which was the picture that you saw on the slideshow that I had. Oh no, that's rude. But it was such a cool. God damn it. Okay, I'll double check and make sure that you guys can access it. It worked on my iPad. That's annoying. It was essentially this image here, and you could click on all of the different farms, and it would tell you what the crops were. It's not the most pertinent part of the homework, so if we can't access it, we can't access it. Because the most important part is going to be this presentation. You're going to go through, you're going to read this, look through the Wazoo Agricultural Extension, and you're going to write a reflection. And it's going to be regarding the presentation I just gave, but it's going to be about our local crops, and then your personal experiences with food. Do you have access to food? How has food rising costs affected you? Has it affected you? Are you like, oh, it's fine that I have to spend $10 on eggs, whatever. Or maybe you don't because you have chickens in the backyard. I would love to hear personal effects of how it's affecting you. But I also want you to be more aware of the agriculture in Skagit if you're not already. And if you're from an agricultural family, awesome. I want to hear all about that too. So it's a reflection. You're not doing any research here. But I do want it to be thoughtful, and I do want you to read through this presentation because that's where you're going to get the information. It does say 2 pages. I'm hoping for 2 pages, but if you're really struggling coming up with 2 pages, I'm not going to grade too hard down on that. If it's like a page and a half, it's at 1.5 spaces, so you should be fine, but I'd rather that information be accurate and that you write it appropriately than you trying to push it to 2 pages, okay? The lab is lengthy this week, but I did that on purpose. You're only using 2 programs or 2 websites, and you're going to download a document again and fill it out. And it's embedded through here, so you shouldn't have any problem. It's really interesting. You're going to look at food supply in a global sense and what sort of how, I guess I'll just click on it, why not? And there's different graphs you're going to have to scroll down and find. So you're going to look at this graph. I think you don't look at that one. You're going to look at this graph. This is a really important one. So this is daily supply of calories per person. So in the country, we have access to upwards of 3,911 kilocalories, which is calories. That's just calories. They say kilocalories, but on the food, it's calories, right? So we can eat upwards of almost 4,000 calories a day. Not all of us are consuming that much, right? And then you're going to consider that as well. There are a couple more graphs that it's going to have you scroll down to. And it's the inequitability around the world regarding food and food access. You're going to look at that. And then the impact. This one's a cool site too that I found. And this is Food Sustainability Index Interactive World Map. You're going to look at our scores. I think I did Canada. So this has overall scores, food loss and waste. Canada's right here. You're going to have to click on this one here to actually get the data. But I do want to point out that the higher the score on this website, it's the better program. So this guy has food loss at 100, and that you're initially going to think like, oh shit, that's bad. No, that's good. So Canada's policy response to food loss is like, think of it as like 100% on your exam. They have 100% on policy response to food loss, but they only have 71% on food waste. So think of it like that. It goes up to 100. I hope this is going to be a really interesting lab for you. I thought it was really interesting when I wrote it, so hopefully this will be fun. Otherwise, that's all I got for you. Ooh, it's so dark in here. It's only 5:30, you guys, and it's so dark outside. I'm sad. Yeah, please reach out with any questions or concerns. Next week, I'm super excited about water resources is a geology thing, so I'm excited. And take Geology 101 next term. I'll be teaching it. It'll be fun. Okay, thank you, friends. Goodbye.